December 1966. A man lies in a hospital bed, dying from lung cancer. He points up to the drop tile ceiling above him, tracing out a map of plans to his brother. Plans for a huge swath of land in Florida that he wants to turn into the perfect city of tomorrow. No homelessness, no unemployment, no inclement weather, and no visible cars. That man is Walt Disney, and his plan? The experimental prototype community of tomorrow, or Epcot.
I thought you were going to say he was working on his plans for invisible cars.
Hello and welcome to Remember, a show about history, mystery, and did you know that Epcot, one of the theme parks that is part of Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida, was never intended to be a theme park, but rather an actual city where people lived.
Was he high?
On nicotine, this man smoked so many cigarettes. There's actually a whole thing about how they've airbrushed a bunch of official Disney photos.
To get rid of the cigarettes? So it's just him with random two fingers gesturing at things. No wonder he stopped having to do the voice of Mickey Mouse. Hey, kids.
Joining me in this episode is, of course, my co-host, Matthew. That frozen lemonade is $20. I'd rather die of dehydration and heat stroke, Jude. And I'm Paula. If I'm going to stand in this line for over an hour, there better be a roller coaster at the end of it, Deming.
You have summed me up perfectly in this introduction, Paula, and I appreciate you for it.
Good.
I have never been to Disneyland. Disney World. This one's Disney World, right?
We'll be talking mostly about Disney World, but either one, you know.
I've never been to Disney World. I tell you now, one of the big reasons for it is I hate being ripped off.
It's basically like you're in an airport the whole time.
And it's America, so you have to literally go through airport security to get into the bloody place.
Yeah.
I remember I went to Universal Studios for dinner once when I was in Florida, because there was a restaurant there that we were going to go to, and we had to have our bags scanned just to get in. It's what is this?
This is an episode for all of you Disney heads out there. I actually don't know if that's what they call themselves, but I'm saying Disney heads. And even for those of you who aren't tunophiles and don't care about Disney stuff so much, this episode is still for you. I was actually researching a...
Dyslexia. Dyslexia. More statistic.
Mouse-tistic. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, so I was actually researching a totally different topic when the host of the YouTube video I was watching mentioned very offhandedly that Walt Disney had originally intended Epcot to be a city where people lived, a community of the future. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And immediately switched gears and started researching this instead. So that's how we got here.
Did he want it to be some type of Fourth Reich?
He was not a Nazi sympathizer.
He was friends with a lot of them, though.
At one point, he was actually a bit of an, I won't say FBI spy. He consulted with them on some things. And one person argued hey, if he was a real Nazi sympathizer, then he probably wouldn't have been allowed to have that position. However, we know that the U.S. government did use an actual literal Nazi for some stuff, right? Klaus Barbie. So who knows?
And also, I think Walt Disney was pretty anti-communist.
He was very anti-communist, yes.
Hell yeah, brother.
Because he was anti-union, and he saw them all as being the same thing, because his workers went on strike against him, and it made him go, I hate this. And instead of improving things, he ended up deciding he hated unions, and therefore, and he combined that with communism. And he actually testified against people during the Red Scare and all of that. So there's some, yeah, he's pretty anti-communist.
I mean, I'm anti-communist, but I do think unions are pretty good.
Yeah.
I think that is a line you're able to tread, realistically.
I think so as well. I think you can be in a union and not be a commie, you know? I don't think those things are mutually
I
exclusive.
think you could be in a union and think that freedom of thought is okay.
Oh, yeah.
So there we go.
But this is very interesting. So remember that he's anti-communist later. Just bear it in mind as we talk about things, because I think there's some very interesting things that come up. So I have a very specific mental image of Epcot, the theme park, when I think of it. And a futuristic living community is not it.
It is clean, though.
It is clean. Everything in Disney, it's very clean. They don't sell gum in a Disney park.
That's the least American thing I've ever heard.
Also, so I grew up on the East Coast of the United States. And I now live on the West Coast where they have Disneyland. And so growing up, I assumed that like everyone was as familiar with Disney World as I was, right? Because even though I only went to Disney World like twice in my youth, it was ubiquitous. But I learned living on the West Coast that like a lot more people than I realized aren't familiar with it or haven't ever been there. And so for those of you in the U.S. and especially outside of the U.S. who are not intimately acquainted with the idea of Walt Disney World, I'm going to try and paint a picture for you to give you some context. The land for Walt Disney World is in Florida, just outside Orlando. It actually is in 2 different counties. Disneyland opened in California in the 1950s, and by the 1960s, Walt wanted to expand into other theme park locations. He was able to purchase over 27,000 acres of Florida wetlands, 43 square miles. Guess how many times Manhattan can fit in that?
Oh, I don't know. 4.
Okay, not quite that. I realized I set that up like it was going to be really dramatic, like 10 Manhattans. It's twice the size of Manhattan. So that's still pretty darn big.
I'm not surprised it was for sale.
It was just like...
Just swamp.
Yeah.
Oh, you can have 80 acres. Oh, that's brilliant. I'll buy you. Oh, well, in that case, I'm fine. I don't need 80 acres of alligators and mosquitoes. Cheers.
Well, Disney was like, this is actually really great because we're surrounded by swampland, we don't have to build fences to keep people out. He literally like says that in a presentation.
That's fairly pragmatic.
It's also right at the middle of 2 major highways that run through Florida. The one that goes north-south and the one that goes east-west. It's like right where they meet.
Did you know at the turn of the century, you couldn't get to Miami by road? You had to go by train.
I did not know that.
That's a little fact I got for you. There you go. That's for you.
So picture it, right? Disney World is huge. Like when you're a kid and your family has finally saved up enough money to go to Disney World and you're sat in the back of the family Chevy Astro van and you drive onto the property past the signs and the entrance gate and you're like, we're here, Disney World. And then you just keep driving.
What's there? I can't even imagine it.
It's just like swampland that you're just driving through for a while. It's just like grass and trees. And you're like, I thought we were at Disney World, but right now we're just still on a road.
So it's not like jam-packed full of fun stuff.
Well, you have to drive some distance to get to the jam-packed stuff.
See, this is what annoys me. Oh, Disney World, it's twice the size of Manhattan. How big is the actual theme park?
Well, Magic Kingdom is, I believe...
Is there more than one theme park?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to talk to you about. And as I'm setting some context here, but the Magic Kingdom, which is basically Disneyland again, is 5 times the size of Disneyland. You need at least a full day to do all of the Magic Kingdom, maybe 2 or 3, frankly. Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World is much bigger. And again, as someone who grew up with Disney World and then as an adult went to Disneyland, I was like, why is it so small? Everyone's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, it's really small compared to what I picture as Disney World.
The only one I've ever been to is Disneyland Paris because obviously I'm British. And I was 7, so I don't remember anything really from it other than stopping in a Wild West hotel and not being able to go in any of the rides because I was too small.
Oh, that's a bummer.
And it was February, I think, and it was really, really cold.
Sounds like a bad time.
No, it's the best time ever. When I got back, I remember I started designing my own theme park.
I love that. And that's when you started playing Roller Coaster Tycoon. I would like, at some point, I want to take you to Disneyland.
I just think I'll hate it.
I know you think you will, but I think actually we'd have a really good time.
And I don't want to like get down on anyone's thing that they enjoy. I don't like, it's like, why would an adult go to Disney World? It's like, because they have fun.
Yeah.
Because they can. That's
Why not? It's a fun time. Okay, so we have Magic Kingdom, again, which is basically Disneyland, again, but bigger. Then the second park they opened, Epcot. And this is modeled after a World's Fair. It's one of my favorite parks, though a lot of people would say it's the most boring. It has more rides now than it used to. It used to not have very many rides, but has and we call them attractions, excuse me. In Disney, everything's an attraction. So it has attractions that talk about progress and the future and technological advancements. And then like the other half of the park is different areas made to look like you've traveled to other countries. So you can pretend like you've gone to France, Mexico, Japan, Morocco, Canada, the UK, all kinds of places. It's like 11 different countries. And it used to be cool as a grown-up. I never went to Epcot as a grown-up, but I remember like grown-ups thought it was cool because you could drink in those country pavilions. But now you can drink in all the parks, so it's not special anymore.
We've been to Fusan, though, me and you together.
Basically Disney, yeah.
That's what the Magic Kingdom's based on, essentially, because the Magic Kingdom is based on all of the Cinderella's
Well, it's
castle.
Sleeping Beauty's castle in Disneyland, I think, and Cinderella's castle in Disney World.
Oh, get off your high horse.
Okay, then there's also, so we have two parks. Then the next park they opened up was Disney MGM Studios, which is now called Disney's Hollywood Studios because they stopped licensing MGM. Anyway, and it's basically like movie production themed. It's got like a fake Chinese theater and a Hollywood Boulevard. And all the like pretend Los Angeles sites there are way nicer than actual Los Angeles.
There's no fentanyl outbreak at Disney MGM Studios.
And then the last park was Animal Kingdom, which was super boring when I went as a kid because it was brand new and it only had like 3 rides. You could do Animal Kingdom in like half a day. Not anymore. It's got a lot more now because it's been like 25 years. But
Do they have animals? Like a
it has an
park?
animal safari. Yeah, go first thing. Here's my hot tip for you. The very first thing you do in Animal Kingdom, go as soon as it opens and go to the animal safari. Because if you even wait a couple of hours, it is too hot and those animals are not going to be out. You got to go before it gets too hot in the day and they're hiding and sleeping.
Do you know one of the biggest elephant sanctuaries in the world is in Tennessee?
I did not know that.
Wild.
This also has a dinosaur area and it's now got a whole like Avatar world.
Real dinosaurs?
Yeah, real dinosaurs.
What a dream weaver.
A real Imagineer. So that's the tiniest bit of modern day context for how I think of Disney World. So now, let's travel back to 1965. Ed White becomes the first American to conduct a spacewalk. Muhammad Ali beats Sonny Liston in a fight. And the Beatles.
That's all the context you need.
It's like, I was looking at like something that was like, here's all the cultural important events from 1965. And like every third thing was something to do with the Beatles. And I was like, cool.
The Beatles went here.
And the Beatles.
Went here.
Great. And Walt Disney is unveiling his plans for the experimental prototype Community of Tomorrow. So Disney is a big tech nerd. His entire career, he was on the forefront of new technologies. He was the first to create animation with synchronized sound. That's what Steamboat Willie, the first time we see Mickey Mouse, that's what that was. He was an early, and then he whistles. He's like, and it's like people were wowed, right? He was an early adopter of the 3-strip process of film coloring. He made the first feature-length animated movie, of course, Snow White. He put together the first monorail system in the Western Hemisphere for Disneyland.
You can go from Shelbyville.
Is that a Simpsons reference?
It is, Monorail. One of the best episodes of The Simpsons. I did see the behind the scenes of a Disney film once. It was just a clip, and it was showing you how they made depth in a cartoon.
Oh, yes. It's so cool.
It's the
yes.
coolest thing ever. It's all these different glass panels with the animation on, and the camera can zoom through the glass panels, and it really feels like you're not. As the camera zooms towards it, it makes it look like it's going through. It's just the coolest thing ever. I literally can't explain it, and I'm a modern human.
So they built this rig where like a vertical tower of the different like panels set at distances, because Disney was like, I want to be able to zoom in, but the moon should not be getting as big as the grass in the foreground. So he put them all at different distances, and then they mounted the camera vertically pointing down, like overhead at them, and then the camera could move in toward it, and then that would create basically like the parallax and the perspective. It's so cool.
You've used the word parallax. That just makes me believe what you're saying.
Historian and author Arthur P. Moleya wrote about Disney, quote, "Technology permeated his life. As Walt rode the post-war wave of technological boosterism, he changed nearly every technology he touched. And through television shows that beat the drums for NASA and the space program, he fueled America's enthusiasm for the technological future." Walt designed 4 exhibits for the 1964 New York World's Fair, and that's how he developed his audio animatronics. It's why his parks have things like the Hall of Presidents and the Pirates of the Caribbean ride.
I do remember going on a small world.
That was made for the New York World's Fair.
It was fine.
One of the exhibits for the World's Fair was the Carousel of Progress, which you can still ride, I'm putting ride in quotes here, at the Magic Kingdom in Florida. I'm pretty sure it's still there. It was the last time I was there, which was like 7 years ago or so. It's one of those where you just kind of sit in the air conditioning and you're like, oh yeah. But it's cool. It features an audio animatronic family talking about their lives through different decades and into the future. And they sing a song about there being a big, bright, beautiful tomorrow. And Walt came away from that experience thinking, I want to be the one to create that big, bright, beautiful tomorrow. So he got zoning permission to build a city on his Florida property.
That couldn't have been easy.
No. Well, he had to agree to make the Magic Kingdom first before doing the city. Because they were like, okay, if you're going to do this, you have to do something that's like bringing in money for the state, this tourist area. So he's like, okay, I will first do Magic Kingdom, and then I'm going to do my city. He even got them to agree to the creation of the Reedy Creek Improvement District, which basically gave the Disney company all the power of a government over this area of land without any of the actual responsibilities that a government has.
That hasn't bit them in the arse in recent political stories.
It literally just got... I was looking up at this, yeah. So it's not called the Reedy Creek Improvement District anymore, but it just got, overturned. They were like, no, you have to do government stuff. They've replaced people on the board. There's a whole mess going on with it right now. But at the time, it's like we have full control and say over what happens here. Because Disney wanted to have total say and total control over the city he was building and how the community in it lived and functioned.
It's almost like the mixture between a reserve and a religious compound. Do you know what I mean?
It's a bit cult-like when you think about it.
Well, think of it this way. It's like we own this land. We're going to live life the way that we want to live life here. We're going to govern ourselves. We're going to control what goes on in the churches, schools, hospitals, anything that we build here. And we're going to do it with this immunity to common law almost, in a way.
Except take the word we out and replace it with just Walt. Walt is going to be the one in control over the way the people are living and what's being taught in the schools. And that
makes me uncomfortable.
But he's anti-communist.
Well, dictators come in all shapes and sizes, Paula.
Yes. Yes, it's true.
Sorry. Leader-nears.
Also, I want to be clear, we're making jokes, but I am not anti-Disney. I'm not anti-Walt Disney. I think he was honestly, I truly believe he was an incredible man who influenced the world more than we can possibly fathom. His technological, creative, imaginative work and movement toward progress. I think was amazing.
Well, I think culturally he's the most significant person in culture other than the Beatles themselves.
Yeah. Well, even think like I've been going back and forth on like sometimes I want to call him Disney because it's his last name. But then I'm like, but if I say Disney, it's going to imply the company. Because at this point, Walt Disney is a company name. But Walt Disney was that's a person. Is ubiquitous. So first, there was going to be the Airport of Tomorrow, which was on the southern end of the property that visitors and residents could fly into. Then, a welcome center everyone would have to enter through once they left the airport. Then, they all get on a monorail, or people mover, to go further into the property.
Monorails are great. I'm all for monorails, just so you know. Just where I stand on monorails, excellent.
The first stop on this ride is an industrial park, and then on to the city itself.
Firstly, you stop at the re-education center, then you move on to your assigned role. No, I'm not against Disney either, to be honest.
Wait
it's
till
just
you
funny.
hear about this city, Matthew. It is kind of like that. Like, it's such a cool idea, while at the same time I have moments where I'm like, is that creepy? I'm not sure.
I'm picturing him like the bad guy in the film Equilibrium, and I'm imagining that Disney knows gun fu.
Oh, for sure. So there's an investor pitch video that Disney made just a few months before he died, going over all of his Epcot ideas.
I bet it's good.
And when he first introduces his community concept, he sounds so genuinely excited about it. Like, watching him talk, you almost can't help but believe that all of his ideas are not only achievable, but also really good ideas that we should definitely do.
The most exciting, the most important part of our Florida project, in fact, the heart of everything we'll be doing in Disney World, will be our experimental prototype city of tomorrow.
This was supposed to be the heart of this project, and it never actually happened.
I imagine once Disney was gone, that wasn't the money-making part of the park.
Well, also, we'll get into this, but it would have been so complicated to do. It would have been so difficult to actually achieve this. And without Walt and his vision driving everyone to figure out how to do it, it just wasn't going to happen. It just wasn't. So in this video, Walt invites us to take a closer look at the detailed plans for the city and says,
will take its cue from the new ideas and new technologies that are now emerging from the creative centers of American industry. It will be a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and new systems. And Epcot will always be a showcase to the world for the ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise, an experimental prototype community that will always be in a state of becoming. It will never cease to be a living blueprint of the future.
It sounds like it is a World's Fair.
it is, in a way. I think he was really inspired by working on the World's Fair. And so he's like, how do I make a World's Fair that people live in? And I really think that is kind of what he was after.
If the World's Fair ever happened, look at Chicago mud flood. Yeah, that's right, Tartaria.
I don't know anything about that, so...
Look, if you go down some weird history videos, that's what you end up in.
He also refers to Epcot as a living showcase. This is one of those things where I'm like, oh, this sounds cool. Wait, is that creepy? A living showcase. Like, are people in a zoo? Like, it's weird. Like, there's just little things that I go, that feels weird.
But he could have just said a shining example.
Yeah.
But he is a man of attraction.
Yes.
So a showcase, something that you can come see and go, wow, this is how they're living here. I think in his mind, he means it in that way, not a people's zoo.
Right.
Which, again, if you wanted to go to a people's zoo, you actually could have done that at the World's Fair.
No. What?
Oh, a lot of the time at the World's Fair, they would ship people in from across the world to come and live in the way that they live in their country, in the World's Fair. There's great stories about native people from Taiwan that they brought over, and they just...
Weird. Oh my gosh.
So a lot of people are very much against this because it literally was a people's zoo in some ways, and I think some people were very badly mistreated and all that. But on the other hand, there's some great stories.
It's like gosh, it's like on the one hand, it's dehumanizing, and on the other hand, it's humanizing at the same time. What a weird, because it's like, oh, these are real people, and they are just different from me. It has that opportunity, but on the other hand, it has the opportunity to just completely be like, look at these other,
Yeah, exactly.
Walt felt like there was a lot to fix about urban living in America. That cities had a lot of problems, and that those problems maybe couldn't be solved by putting like Band-Aids over current establishments. So he thought, we should just build a place from scratch. And there was a lot of change at this time in what American cities and communities looked like. There was more integration happening. I mean, it's 1965, so we are smack in the middle of the civil rights movement. And this was causing a lot of the more affluent white people and families were moving out of cities and into the suburbs to get away from this integration. And that was leaving behind people who couldn't afford to move. So now there wasn't money flowing into those communities the way that it had before. So these kind of like inner city areas were starting to fall apart.
But that could also have been getting away from the issues that integration was happening. I think wording it in a way that says that these white people were leaving urban areas to go off and have their own white-only places makes them all sound like they were all racists who are leaving the cities.
I'm not going to say everyone, because I wasn't there, I wasn't alive, but I do think that a lot of the movement out of these urban areas to the suburbs was a direct result of not wanting to was a reaction based in bigotry.
Okay, we'll leave that there. I think I disagree with you on that.
So how did Walt think he could change things with Epcot?
No blacks.
The investor video says, no city of today will be the guide for the city of tomorrow. The city layout is basically a wagon wheel with spokes on it. And the spokes are a transportation network that radiates out from the center, connecting all the different areas of this circular community. So the very center is a business district featuring a hotel and convention center planned to be at least 30 stories tall with a 7-acre recreation deck for all your swimming pool and golf course needs.
Can you build a 30-story building on a swamp?
Well, I think the swamp surrounded.
You got to pour a lot of concrete.
But maybe this land, I don't know. It's fair.
Walt, I'm just asking the questions. You got to solve the answers to these.
There were shopping areas planned, made to look like different places from around the world. So you could go shopping in Paris without ever leaving Florida. There are theaters, restaurants, bars, nightclubs, and of course office buildings for people to work in. Every major corporation could have an office building for people who live in Epcot to work at. But now here's the twist. This entire central area would be enclosed in a dome.
I thought you were going to say it was a tax haven, but in a dome is just as interesting.
Like a giant snow globe, so those people pretending to shop in Paris never have to worry about rain or humidity ruining their day. I love that these California people went to Florida and thought, oh gosh, we have got to do something about this humidity.
They're not the first people to arrive in Florida and go, wow, it's hot.
The other twist, no cars, Matthew. Only monorails. Which I guess is not exactly true. So under that big hotel, there would be a transportation hub with a lobby where you can get on and off high-speed monorail, or if you're just traveling within a short distance, a Wedway people mover. So a people mover is basically cars that are just always going. They never stop. They slow down at platforms enough that you can just walk onto them. Like in the Haunted Mansion.
It's just like getting on a roller coaster.
Getting on a ride where it never stops. You just walk onto it and then it keeps going.
Like a ski lift.
Under all of that is where the cars and the delivery trucks could be. So the very bottom level is just for supply trucks and loading docks. Then above that is cars for hotel guests or other people who are driving. But there are no stoplights ever. Traffic just keeps moving, everything's just a really big roundabout. So there are no traffic jams. There are no accidents. There's no waiting for trains because that people mover is always moving.
I've been to Chicago, all right? Chicago is surrounded by a giant roundabout. It's terrifying.
Yeah, but this one is underground.
I feel like that would make it more terrifying.
So if you get on that people mover, you'll get to the high-density apartments and housing on the outskirts of the business district. Then if you keep riding, you get to the next outer layer of the wheel, the green belt of parks. It includes playgrounds, athletic fields, churches, schools, anything considered like recreational. Then the most outer layer of the wheel is, of course, also the largest portion of the wheel, because that's how circles work. As you get to the outside, they get bigger. But this is the suburban style neighborhood. Each spoke of the wheel is a different people mover track with a different cul-de-sac style neighborhood at the end of it. So these neighborhoods are mostly green areas with more recreation and playgrounds and footpaths for pedestrians. No cars drive through this part of the neighborhood. You don't need to drive. You got a people mover stop right outside your door. Also, none of this green area is your yard or back garden. It is all publicly shared green area.
I like a few of these ideas, but a few of them also I hate.
See, some of it's like, oh, but none of this is mine.
It's all owned by the king.
But also, it does sound nice, right? Like, I'd love to not ever have to get in my car. So if you do need to drive somewhere, though, your garage opens up basically to a back alley that connects you to the other car-only roadways in the city. The investor video very proudly states, most Epcot residents will drive their automobiles only on weekend pleasure trips. To get to work, they'll take the people mover or monorail to their office in the business district, or out to the theme park on the north end of the property, or to the industrial park that is between the city and the airport.
Problem I have with this, though, is that this idealized city only works if there are other places outside of Epcot that are real cities. This is a fantastic utopia of a city where everything's wonderful and great, but where's the food production? That's still in Ohio. Where's the steel mills? They're still in, where's the steel mill? Well, it's still in Detroit. Where's this thing that they need and this thing that they need and all these components that they're being built? And unless you say we're going to make lots of these cities and this city is going to be a perfect industrial city, it's like your perfection and literal bubble that you're living in only works if there are other cities where people who aren't allowed to live in Epcot, who have to live in a normal city, who have to drive their car to the steel mill in Wisconsin, and then ship that stuff to Epcot, where it's then hidden underground. And you're just thriving off the backs of working class people that you sweep under the rug and you can't see. Now, I understand that it's a great idea and it's wonderful, and if all cities were like this, but where are things being made?
That's outside of this. So one could argue that some of these things you're talking about could be in the industrial park that is in between the airport and the city. But I think your point is incredibly valid. Like, totally. Like, yeah.
An industrial park, right? How big would an industrial park have to be to make everything that you need in a city?
Yeah.
Think of the cost of the pieces of American, if you're only paying American prices. You're not getting your computer chips from Taiwan. You're not getting your steel from China or somewhere like that. It's ridiculous.
Well, I think this is like when Disney wasn't there anymore. Everyone was like, this is how are we supposed to do this? And they just stopped working on it. Because how were they supposed to do it?
It's a great idea. I'm not against the idea. And, if you revolutionize society on a whole, then maybe. And I'm not against striving and trying to do these things, but I'm just thinking in a pragmatic way. It's just like they're going to be so reliant on imports. It's almost like it's its own little country, right? They're going to be importing stuff, not only from the US, but they're going to have to import from abroad to fuel this city. Where's the power plant? Is there a power plant in the city, or is the power plant outside the city? We don't want the dirty power plant here.
I think it's meant to be in like this industrial park area. I think in Disney's mind, this city would be fully self-sufficient, but I don't know how he was actually going to achieve that, right? So he does describe like the industrial park. He imagined it as a place where all kinds of companies would come to like innovate and research and experiment and make their products. And then like visitors could come through and like look at it all and be inspired. But like, how practically was this actually all going to happen? I have no idea.
Well, we have an example of this already that exists. It sounds to me like he's making Silicon Valley.
Yeah, it does feel a bit like that, right? It's all like an incubator for technology.
What does Silicon Valley thrive on? I don't know. Migrant labor? Who works in the sandwich shop in Silicon Valley? I bet they've got a Spanish accent. You know what I mean? It's like, this sounds so utopic, I guess would be a word that I could make up.
Oh, yeah, he definitely thought he was making a utopian.
And I'm all for striving is a fantastic thing. It sounds so abusable.
Oh, yeah.
It's like those, people always go on about the United Arab Emirates, right? They don't pay tax in the United Arab Emirates, and the education's great, and the healthcare is fantastic, and there's no tax, and all these businesses go to the UAE to exist, and it's fantastic. There's no crime. It's like, yeah, but all those buildings were built by Singaporean slave labor, but it's all swept under the rug. It's like, yeah, they're all built by slaves from Malaysia, like literal slaves. And it's like, well, it's so wonderful and perfect here. But really, it's under the carpet of the...
It's very, like, dystopian in a way.
It is. It sounds like an episode of Black Mirror.
Yeah.
I just think it speaks more to the nature of people. That, the people living there in their little utopia and their white picket fence that leads on to this beautiful park and stuff. And it's like, it's all very wonderful here. But outside the city limits is where the people live who actually make this utopia work. And there is a massive power difference between those two people. Now, I sound like the communist. I just think that, your pleasure is going to be ultimately built on the backs of, and the outside group is working class America. Like, what it sounds to me a bit like? It's almost like we're going to have our perfect society on the moon. And it's all going to be wonderful with flying cars and everything's going to be great. And all the stuff that we use is going to be built by people back on Earth who can't afford to come to the moon.
I don't think that's Walt's intention, but maybe that's what would... Because what I'm about to talk about here is what Walt expected people to do, which is he expected 20,000 people to live in Epcot, and they all have to work there. So at first this is framed as there'll be jobs for everyone, which sounds really nice. But then, for me, it gets a little bit ominous with, this quote, all residents will have a responsibility to contribute to keeping this place a living blueprint of the future. Very specifically, no one who lives there can be retired. There are no people not working, which sounds a bit communist to me. To live here, you have to work a job that contributes to this society that we have, this city.
And in theory, that sounds great. I just don't know how practical this idea is. Because in a way, it's like you have to work to contribute to the city. Which makes me think, what is Walt Disney really trying to make?
It's like a company town.
Like, Bourneville was fantastic. I love the idea of Bourneville. One of the first company town in the world, I think Bourneville was. And it's a shining example. The Bourneville, the owners of the factories, the first time that workers had ever been called by their names in a factory in the UK. But to me, it sounds like Walt isn't trying to make a perfect place for people to live in. He's just trying to make a perfect place.
Yeah, I think so.
So who does it serve other than Walt Disney himself?
He thinks it serves everyone. He thinks it serves society. He thinks it serves America's place in the world because it's going to achieve technological advancements. But would that have happened? I don't know.
Because it's just one giant business rather than a real city. Because the city has people who can't work.
Yeah, what happens if you lose that job or you get injured and you can't work? What happens? We don't know because they never got far enough into the planning to deal with those things.
When you think of society, you take society back to It's a simple form, a small village somewhere, right? Where you've got the young, the workers, the old, the ill. Every member of a family is there. A city has all those things as well. And if you haven't got any room for the young and the old, then you really don't have a city. You have a business.
I should clarify that, like, families are there. There are schools, there's playgrounds for kids, all that stuff. So, like, if you're a kid, you're obviously not expected to work. You're going to school, you're doing your kid things. It is for families. But once you get to, I guess, like 18, you either got, if you want to, like, live there on your own, you're going to have to get a job there, or you have to move out. And then, yeah, retirement age does not exist in this city.
On the other hand, I do appreciate you don't have to move very far to retire.
It's Florida.
That's what everyone does in Florida.
Also, the houses are going to be built so that at any time, any of your stuff could be swapped out to test new technologies. You don't own any of it. So don't get attached to that Google Home, because you might step off the Wedway people mover to discover it's been replaced by the latest experimental Alexa. Like, again, it's like he wants a place where we're testing out new things and we're showing what can work. It's all like a model community. And I don't mean model in the sense of, like, look up to it. I mean, it's like we're testing everything here.
It's not a real city, then, he wants to build. He wants to build a prototype, a big testing lab.
Epcot, experimental prototype community of tomorrow. It straight up is. He wants everything there to be a prototype that gets tested and proven and then implemented through the rest of the country.
See, if that is the idea, then I can understand it. But billing it as a real city to live in is, I mean, I suppose if you don't own the house, if you work there and stuff, you don't own anything, then I guess hopefully the Walt Disney bank account that you have is getting filled with your wages that you never have to spend.
Oh, yeah, you're not getting paid American dollars. You're getting paid Disney bucks.
And you can't spend those even at everywhere in the park.
No, they're only accepted at certain places. Not like the ice cream parlor will not take the Disney bucks.
Maybe it's like being in the military. You don't own anything. You do what you're told. They might swap out everything you own for something else the next time. You go where you're told to do.
That is honestly such a good comparison in that way. Yeah.
And everyone is like doing the mission, everyone's working together, but at least all the money that you're earning is going into a bank account so you can leave with something.
So, yeah, maybe you can now understand why I was so surprised that this was the original plan for the theme park that had a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids ride.
I was going to say, what's there now?
They have a pretty cool, like, car racing kind of thing, like a crash test dummy themed ride. It's been so long since I've been to Epcot, like literally since I was like 16 or 17 since I've been to Epcot. So who knows what's there? A lot has changed since, but
like I'm not against the idea of this. I think it's a cool idea. I just think billing it as a real city is not true. I think be honest about it. Like, come live in this experiment. That's fine. You might go, you know what? I'll go for it. I'm going to go and live in the Epcot experiment for 5 years, try it, sounds cool. I'm buying into that. But making it out that this is the blueprint for how society should be run, it's like, well, I need to have a say in that then.
Yeah. It kind of feels to me almost like you're agreeing to live in the Truman Show. Walt Disney died before either Epcot or the Magic Kingdom were built. And his brother Roy said, "Let's not call this place Disney World. Let's call it Walt Disney World, to honor my brother."
It's already named after him.
Yeah, but he didn't have his... But he was also a Disney. He wanted it Roy Disney, right?
What did his other brothers say? G and Biv.
G and Biv. That's pretty good.
That's why he invented Technicolor. I'm not sure that joke worked, Paula, but it was a good shot. I tried.
It worked for me. I liked it. But without Walt's vision, the plans for the city of Epcot fell apart. I mean, like we've said, how do you actually achieve something like that?
It just takes one skeptical asshole like me to come in and say, really? And everyone loses.
And then it all falls apart, yeah. So instead, roughly 20 years later, this area opened as Epcot Center. Not an experimental community of the future, but a permanent World's Fair. And you have to wonder, if Walt had lived 10, 20 more years, what would Epcot be?
Thank you so much, Paula, for doing the research on this episode. It was weird.
It's weird, right? He's such a fascinating man. He really is.
We could probably do another episode on Walt Disney, I imagine, at some point.
There is so much we could talk about Walt Disney, but yeah.
But also, I'd like to say thank you so much, everyone who is listening to this show, whether that be on YouTube or you're listening to it as a podcast. We appreciate you so much. The best way to help us out is by interacting with the show in some way. Even one word in a review on your podcatcher of choice is a fantastic way to help us out. Leave a 5 stars is also another thing that you can do. It's effortless, almost. Also, of course, you can like, subscribe, and comment down below if you're watching this on YouTube or anywhere else that you happen to be watching it. That's another thing that gives the show impactful momentum that we really, really appreciate. So thank you, everyone who does that, and we would love it if you would help us out in that way. Paula, thank you so much for doing the research of this show. I appreciate you immensely.
Thanks for listening to me talk for so long.
And we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
And don't you forget it.